Welcome. This is the last session of the day. We wanted to be merciful. I think Pivotal was very smart to organize these final sessions as 30-minute endeavors rather than the 70-plus minute ones. That gave me a strong cue to try to be very simple about this, be opinionated, and give you a chance to make your own opinions. Because what I'm going to talk about today isn't so much about technology, it's about how technology happens. This is a program conversation. I'm going to start by telling you who I think you might be, or at least I'm hoping you might be, to see if I can connect what I'm going to say to why I think you might be here. If you are an architect and you have just figured out how to negotiate a deal with Pivotal, you think the idea of a platform as a service initiative is awesome. You see lots of potential savings, the modernization, all of the things that you want, but you're not sure how to translate your vision into something that's actually going to get people to adopt, welcome. I'm trying to talk to you. If you are an application development team manager or director, and you have either taken apps to the Pivotal Cloud Foundry, or you're about to, you're nervous about how to do it again, how to do it better, or how to do it the first time, welcome. We have insights, we have opinions, because I'm part of a large team that's been trying to do this for a couple of years. I'm trying to talk to you. If you are an executive and you are a current or prospective executive sponsor of some large-scale Pivotal adoption, welcome. I'm trying to talk to you too, because this thing is really big, it shakes every tree, and it gets scary. You don't know where to go first. We've done this. We've dealt with the blank canvas. We've taken a few steps in this direction. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So again, this is a program talk. It will brush into topics of technology, how programs work, how culture operates, but it's really mostly about kinesis. And while I'm talking today, my strategy is simple. I've got 4 declarative statements that represent my personal opinions about how we were able to make things go. I do this so that you may form your own opinions. I'm not trying to get you to agree with me. I'm trying to get you to feel what we experienced and how we try to dug through. Because we're pretty good at it. We've gotten a lot of apps online. We've been doing this for a couple of years. By no means are we done, but we at least have the collective confidence that we can get to where we want to go. And this is the story about that. First, a couple things about us. We were a holding company for a long time, and now we're not. We're trying to be what we call an operating company. I think that means operating software. And what we're trying to do is consolidate the way we've been operating so that we may save money. We're big, a couple $2 billion of revenue a year, but we're not huge. But for that size, we are a bit of a sprawl because we used to buy companies and leave them lie. We wouldn't really do anything to try to integrate them. So when we started this initiative, which wasn't the first time to try to consolidate operations at Intrado, we were reaching. There were a lot of different teams that had never really known one another. The various technologies, the licenses, the platforms that we were using were all over the place, and like most of the customers that you would see at an event like this, we were all over the world. This is a slide that we use internally to represent what we would call transformation. And we did some things right, we've done some things out of sequence. We managed to do a CI/CD initiative about a year before we got into a Pivotal Cloud Foundry initiative. A couple of people to thank for that in this room, people that don't even work with us anymore. That small box that's PCF is probably, that in the data center, probably among the most potentially disruptive things that we could be trying to do, just because it touches every team. And it also comes concurrent with other procedural reforms that aren't just about getting apps onto PCF. There's a DevOps revolution going on in there. Something that predated that, we sent a lot of people through Lean Six Sigma training. Scaled Agile framework for the enterprise is also another big initiative that we've been trying to do. So we've been trying to do it all, not necessarily at once, but over the course of a few years. PCF started with a business plan, and this is the first opinion I wanted to share today. The business plan was about saving money, being able to shut down legacy platforms and legacy assets. So we had a clear demonstrable goal, a key performance indicator that we had in mind. So we had a large number of application groups that I would call the coerced. They didn't necessarily want to go anywhere. They thought they were doing just fine on their own. But they had to go somewhere. And we wanted to save money and consolidate operations. Something that we learned, and I still observe to this day, is immediately you have a reason to start talking to dozens and hundreds of teams across the organization. But you have people that must talk to you to be able to check a box and get their workload onto PCF so that their boss will stop bothering them. But then you also have the developers, the QA people, the operations people that work with them that might have other reasons to get interested in a replatforming effort. Those are the people we're trying to engage, and those are the people that are more likely to get you the quality of an application migration that we would like to see. So that's the first opinion. And again, what we're trying to do here is 4 statements, 4 opinions to make you think about how to make your own programs move. The reason we think this is because we did encounter these teams a lot, and we found some hooks that worked for the managers that were coerced, hooks that worked for the people who might potentially be motivated, who might see an effort like this as an opportunity. Easiest way to summarize it is this. If you're to the lower left and that application team is neither particularly motivated to do this migration, and if they don't, neither the team leader nor the members of the team feel that way, then you rely on the commonality, the reason that you're talking to them. We need to shut something down. Let's just shut it down. We need to get your workload in there. We'll do that. There are other program metrics that generally come to you at the beginning. You just rely on those and you try to get them in because ultimately you've got a business plan that you need to support. Ours was about shutting down those assets. But along the way, what you're trying to do as a program is broaden that communication beyond the people who might show up on a weekly call with your project manager. And that's where the team comes in, the team aspect of the program. I'm one person standing here, and I don't write code for a living, I never did. But we work with many smart people who were able to push things along the way. And the first thing I'd insert here is we were very good about engaging with Pivotal directly. And to this day, there are still load-bearing pillars of this project that are absolutely essential to the ongoing week-to-week, month-to-month success of this Pivotal engagement. And they're pivots. They don't work for Intrado, they work for Pivotal. And so first thing I want to do is thank folks like Brian Byers, who's been with us the better part of 2 years, a platform architect. Jonathan Irwin, our first engagement director. Jason Foster, our account manager, who's been with us since the very start. Tony Hansman, a global CTO, who's cottoned on to our approach and he likes what we're doing. Sean Noyes, another platform architect who works with us. Manny Alves, another engagement director. These people are free to roam our organization and pair. Something that we very much appreciate about Pivotal is not just that we're trying to migrate applications, but that they insist on pairing and they get cranky if they're not allowed to pair with other developers and QA people. And I think it's important to let that insistence happen because that pairing will get you to people who are at the contributor level in your own organization. They might get to them better than you do. But wait, there's more. We got another team that works for Intrado, the Cloud Native Enablement Team, which I think is a copyrighted term that belongs to Don Fosgreen. Did you copyright that one yet? All right, good. That's our version of a Center of Excellence team. One of the smartest things we got done was sending Don and a bunch of other people who are seasoned technologists, technology leaders within our own business, and we sent them to Boulder, Colorado for 3 weeks for that Pivotal Acceleration Lab training. They went deep. They already had native knowledge, and they came back with Pivotal knowledge. And those people are on indefinite partial allocation, roving around this business, trying to solve problems. These two teams don't talk to each other every day, the pivots that help us out, the CNETs that help us out, and it's because they don't have to. Their conversation is primarily with those teams, trying to get those people on the top left and the bottom right interested in some aspect of application transformation that's going to be the hook. Motivation gets you quality. That quality generally has something to do with how 12-factor you get or how cloud native you are, so that the business case of efficiency that got us going can turn into a discussion about productivity, rapid value creation, releasing your product more often, just being more portable. Sometimes you're lucky. At the top right, you can actually find a team that is already raring to go and they already see this for the opportunity that it is. Then you just go for it. And what you're trying to do is get those people even more aggressively into the pivots who work with you. We also do an enterprise adoption of New Relic. That's an also important, very clearly functionally related project to this one. And we try to plug those teams into them as quickly as possible because that's what they want. They want to tool, they want to learn more, and they want to get into those networks of service providers so that they can get out in front of a program guy like me in terms of the new features that are coming out, customer advisory boards, the pivotal vanguard. You want those people to engage with those vendors that way because they're going to do it better than a guy like me would, a program guy. So you push and you try to make sure everyone has a chance at upskilling. You invest money, and one of the things that is amazing about my bosses, which would be Robert over there, Thomas right down here, is they knew right away that they had to make sure there was money to train people, get out in front and try to push certificate programs, reimbursements for it. The project is an opportunity for a business to save money, but it's also an opportunity for individuals to upskill, to move up in this organization, to move out if that's what their eventual fate is supposed to be. But you're trying to get those people excited about their own self-actualization. That's where the quality comes from. Points on the board, apps on PCF, that's going to happen. We've got an army of people who do that. We have project managers and all sorts of program folk that will insist on it happening. But that can get you a lot of lifts and shifts too. The quality comes from that lower level, and engaging with them is an important opinion that we wanted to share with you today. Don't dwell in POC mode. It's a lesson we learned, and it's an opinion I think we generally hold pretty strongly. Sure, at the very beginning, you might want to do a platform dojo to get your operations team up and running, to be able to stand up an instance of PCF, sure. You might have an application team or two that's going to be able to come along for the ride with you. They might have their own dojo, and you might get an initial success there. For our case, though, it was very clear, and I think this presser was fortunate, that we felt immediate pressure to get to a large cohort of workers, of application teams, to be able to start to month by month and quarter by quarter start to realize the value of the investment. And again, for us, explicitly, it was shutting down assets on legacy platforms and consolidating applications on PCF. So it was really important for us to not mess around with anything we call a pilot or a POC beyond just a couple of quick dojos late in 2017. By the first part of 2018, we had applications heading towards production, and we had a cohort of another 10 or 20 or 30 more that were already getting going. We learned that if things go well, considering all the stuff that people would have to do to re-platform, the stuff that's not necessarily PCF, but opening up your firewall rules for a new platform, for example, that was going to take about 3 months. And we only knew that after we were about 6 months in. That's the kind of truth that you can only get to at scale. Another thing. This is something I stole from Jason Nash, another one of my co-conspirators. I call him Patient Zero because he was the first application team manager to take an app all the way through prod on PCF at Intrado. He wrote this slide. I just dumbed it down so that I could talk about it. But PCF works. Your application generally works. But for you to get your workload from here to there, you're going to have to run through a gauntlet. And it might be where your database sits, or where your databases must sit, how they may be cached. These services that can only live in Amazon, yet your Foundry is way over here in a private cloud. How are you going to make the service ecosystem around your application's migration go well? These are technology issues, but more fundamentally, we see them as program issues because you as the team responsible for a series of PCF migrations are probably not going to be in charge of this stuff. There's usually some other team that might be running the data layer for you. There might be some other team that's running public cloud operations. You're not going to be successful if you wait for that correspondence to happen. You've got the hammer. You've got the applications that you need to re-platform somehow, so you've got the reason to initiate that dialogue with those other teams. It leads to another opinion. And actually, one other slide before I get to that opinion. All of that complexity, all of those applications taught us different lessons, and it made us arrive at multiple public clouds. We knew we were going to go to at least one. We ended up in 3 because it's okay for now. Services, Windows infrastructure, licensing opportunities that you might find in one public cloud over the other. These are all things that we never would have known about until we tried to get the apps through. And these answers, app by app, case by case, were constructive enough that we were willing to broaden our roadmap significantly beyond where we would have initially expected to. And even the costs of tenancy, we use a showback model that will slide up and down based on how many applications live on a given instance of PCF. Even if those numbers aren't as good now as we would have liked for them to have been a year or two ago, it's okay because they're on. Now we can have a much more sophisticated conversation about how to reduce that drag, how to turn you from something that is cloud plural into cloud agnostic. It allows you to start to have a real conversation with your networking colleagues because they're going to have to set up some hybrid cloud connectivity. They're going to have to go shopping for how to connect from Google over to Amazon. And they're never going to take that request seriously until you've got hostages. And that's what those applications are in this context. You own the app migration. You have the hammer, but you've got to swing it. You've got to get apps and constituents on the platform so that you can push these conversations. And even if it ends up as a bit of a sprawl this year, in a couple years, one of these public clouds will probably go away. One of them will get better at following the sun, which is what we need to do. And we'll do that because that kind of pressure is a good problem to have. You're already on, now save money. The project lives so that it may be challenged again. Next opinion, and all of this is in the context of something that's very important to me. Our executive sponsors, and this has been true with every other conversation I've had with any other Pivotal customer, your executive sponsor puts a lot on the line to get behind a project of this scale and scope, and that person is going to be a piñata for a while because it's going to take 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months for you to start realizing the value. And our project's gone along pretty well. We got a lot of smart, hardworking people on it. We have stayed reasonably close to our financial metrics, but it's still never fast enough. You get a few months in, and people are going to start wondering where those savings we all promised were. You're going to get pushed. So people like me in the middle, we need to help our executive sponsors out by what I call ground cover. And what that means to me is just an ethos that we all generally share, which is welcoming the scope creep, welcoming the mission creep. I'm one of those guys who has to keep a timesheet for a living. I've got a charge code and I'll type in 40 hours for a project. I can think of 5 different projects I've spent time on this week and I never hit their charge codes. I work on New Relic. I work on public cloud operations. I sit with InfoSec guys because we've adopted this app scanning tool and we've got to figure out how to get hundreds of applications to adopt it, and they're not going to like it, you know, when they have to do it the first time through. You have to expose yourself to these other projects and be an asset to them. Whatever they aren't, try to be, because that goodwill is really important, because when your executive sponsor is in a room with their executive sponsor and they start to go back and forth on why Project A isn't getting more attention than Project B, they might quickly realize that their guys are talking to each other and working together. That's the ground cover. You need to give your bosses more than just a promise of productivity. And since this project takes a long time to get to that realization of productivity, you need some goodwill along the way. So you play nice, you reach out, even if it means you may end up sort of semi-stupidly accountable for something that isn't really your job. You got to press. You got to get out there and be an asset to those other projects because they do tend to help you out in the long run. Also, you stay aware of anything that might be a moving target too, which is handy. Just to hammer home that last opinion, this is another graph that tries to articulate everything we're trying to do as a technology strategy enabled by transition. That thing's ServiceNow. Oh, there's about 6 or 7 tools in the CI/CD tool stack there. You could put a wrapper of DevOps around 2/3 of this slide. Every one of those application teams on the left there is trying to experiment with some form of Agile. Still got all these people who are learning Lean Six Sigma, particularly over in ops land, so they're really eager to standardize that work. You've got all of these competing initiatives and priorities. I think the role in trying to organize a program to make this kind of effort successful is, don't see them as competition. There's going to be a reason for them to be allies. And at the very, very, very top of your organization, they might see it that way, but usually for a couple of levels down from there, they won't. And I do think it's the job of the middle to stitch it back together. And it's by talking to your colleagues that represent these other drivers and trying to get victories together. Money. And of the 4 opinions, and this is the last of the 4, this is the one I wish we were doing better. This is one of these things that if I could go back in time a year, we would be much better at this than we are now, but it's worthy of having this as an opinion. It goes back to quality. If you can find a developer on a team and make that person understand that by reducing your transaction cost or the financial value of auto-scaling to your application, if you can get that seed planted with just 1 or 2 people on one of those application teams, you can turn it into a game, right? That's a lot more powerful than a KPI. But if you can actually get those contributors to realize that there's an opportunity to score some points, and if you can turn those points into money, getting technologists to talk about the money they spend is a super useful thing. We only learn this experientially. We started working with application teams that were already sitting in a public cloud direct to IaaS, but they saw benefit in coming over to PCF. They were going to kind of go to PCF and end up on Azure for a variety of reasons. Those people already had a very clear understanding of how much money they were spending day by day, minute by minute. Probably the best advantage, I think, to being in a public cloud is that visibility to your spend. And for the apps that live on the private cloud, and that's the vast majority of our portfolio that has lived there and probably will continue to live there for the time being, anything you can do to create a showback model or a chargeback model early on, even if you don't enforce it, but if you can let people know the cost of tenancy on a private cloud instance of PCF, and bonus points if you can come up with any way to articulate the cost of tenancy on their legacy platforms. That's the thing I'm driving at. If you can get those teams to have that conversation about money, that's the best possible way to start to get to the quality of the app transformations you're looking for. Quantity, the points on the board, the workloads on PCF, that happens generally by other means. But that quality is generally about saving money. And even if you're trying to automate and create value more rapidly, that's going to render as a means of saving money. So a couple specifics about that. If you're trying to engage engineers, get that show back as quickly as possible. If QA is a team that you want to drive, price those lower environments. Try to really prioritize that early on. And if they can't tell you even where the lower environments run, or if they run on a laptop, that's a whole new conversation. And you don't get to have that conversation until you ask them directly where their QA environment sits. And so you might not be saving them money, but they might see just how much more functionality is available to them in a real QA environment. And once they realize that that parity among environments is really there, boom, CI/CD just takes off. Architects, I think licensing is an underestimated type of value that comes up in a project like this, because you'll start talking application teams and you might find 5 or 6 of them that have individual deals with a service provider. There's an easy win, you can consolidate that deal. But if you happen to know that there's 5 or 6 applications that are using this particular service, what if you could kill that agreement? What if you got rid of it all? And that's the mechanic of a program and how it can turn into opportunities for savings that engage people and want them to move along with you. The application team leaders, pricing pre and post PCF. Again, it's something that I wish we did better than we've done. We're starting to get a handle on it now, but the better you can benchmark the expense, the spend that your prospective application tenants can have, that's one of the best things you could do. And also, this is probably going to happen as a matter of course, but if you have a showback or chargeback model, it's probably going to depend on how many applications live on a given site. Make that dynamic very clear, because that becomes a sales tool internally within your own organization, because then they'll realize that their spend goes down if more application tenants go on. All of these opinions above, not specific necessarily to PCF, kind of specific to the idea of a large-scale replatforming effort, but always in this nature of trying to understand that you're pushing an initiative that's going to rely on others, and those other initiatives are going to need your goodwill before they give it back to you. We talked a lot about this with a few people, and one of them is Tony down here, who works for Pivotal. And he and I got a bunch of smart people from our team together to do a lot of elaborations about this. 6 different podcast episodes. They all sit on YouTube. I think they're fascinating, but that's because they were talking about my job for the last 2 years. But through some fascinating editing and a lot of good professional work and some really tough questions, you'll get a pretty in-depth view of how we see our program, what's worked, what hasn't, what we'd like to do again. That is recommended listening. Are there any questions from this group?
So, what was the biggest mistake you made?
You know, 6 months ago, the biggest mistake I think we would have made had you asked us, it would have been that we didn't have a tough enough conversation about the data layer. That we underestimated how hard it would be to move applications and realize that they are truly tethered to that, and moving the app layer is just relatively insignificant when compared to that data layer. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if we were ever going to try to solve all those questions preemptively. That the nature of this work is that we're all moving targets. We're all trying to optimize and make more money or spend less money. And if it wouldn't have been the data layer, it would have been something else. So more recently now, I think it's about money. Get your technology people to think about money, and get your money people to think about technology. But really try to get people who have a direct impact on the spend, do the spend. Something that you saw on the previous slide there was this idea of engagement. And it's an old model. It comes from some academic concept that's decades old. But people are engaged when they think something is relevant, they think something is interesting, and they have control over it. By thinking about it, by engaging with it, by participating with this concept, if they know that they can actually change the direction of that effort, impact it or control it somehow, you hook them. And that might be the best hook, is to get technologists to think about money and turn it into a game if you have to. So I think that's the biggest regret, that we didn't get to that insight more quickly. Any other questions? Yeah.
How did you balance the need to keep the applications running and delivering value while you were making that transition?
We spent a little more money than we needed to early on, I think, to make sure that happened. In other words, there was a soak-in period with PCF, and even if we knew everything was working, those first few applications through, we can understand it, but they needed to sort of get to prod and PCF and more incrementally move their customers over, or wait for a while and see if anything went boom before they actually tried to do a full customer cutover. So I think we tried to resolve that problem by being a little bit generous with our own bottom line as a project, taking a couple of hits that we didn't necessarily need to. But I think it was wise that we realized pushing those people to jump into a full customer cutover before they were ready could do tremendous damage to our program later on, because teams talk. And another thing that we did in the program was make sure to use our instant messaging tools. We use WebEx Teams. It could just as easily be Slack or something else. Get hundreds of people on stage, come up with a common channel, get these people talking to each other. It's noisy, but it's glorious. It's a program in motion. Don't ever be afraid of that stuff. Get people talking to each other right in front of your ops team, even if you don't like what they're saying. Another question?
What was the biggest challenge during the transformation process?
Oh my gosh. Perspective would change the answer. From my own personal perspective, it took me and my immediate colleagues a little time to figure out whom to contact to get something to move, because it wasn't as simple as an org chart. You know, we could look up at the reporting structure, but that didn't really solve the question. And we started to realize that there were, in the parlance of social media, influencers, people that only worked on one team but knew many people from others, and finding those people and make sure those people were taken care of. But if I'm thinking about it from the perspective of an application team, it's that service ecosystem. You want me to move my app layer? Fine, I can do that, but the data, the services, I've got latency issues now that I'm here. I didn't really like my environment here, but it hummed along fast enough. Things like that. Any other questions, or are we out of time? How are we sitting? Let's take one or two more if there's time. Any other questions? Sure.
What were most of the transformation, like what changes actually had to be made for the apps to move them to PCF? Like, was it just replatforming them, or did they rewrite, things like that?
There are a couple people a lot more qualified to answer that than I, but my observation is, unfortunately, some apps had to do much less than they should have to get through that initial migration. That I was looking at a grid of the 12-factor and thinking about just your most basic bare bones lift and shift. How many of those 12 are you actually going to pick off and make some progress with? The only one that felt like a solid guarantee to me was source control, and that's not even PCF. But you can't push without Git or something like it. But that's about the only thing that you absolutely had to do. We didn't have explicit quality program metrics for the quality of your application transformation because our business case wasn't pegged to it. Our business case was pegged to shutting down assets on the legacy platform. And so, unfortunately, I'd say the answer is not as much as they wish they had done now. And then the challenge for our program in that scenario becomes start getting acquainted with the people who manage sprint plans for all of your application teams, because we're going to need to get those product owners and product managers psyched up about spending more time to improve the quality of their apps' cloud nativity or nativeness. I'm not sure what noun form is used there. One more question?
Talk a little bit about the KPIs you used along the journey to kind of track of such a large migration.
Sure. One, simply points on the board, the number of discretely named applications from our architectural portfolio that made it to PCF. Along the way, we wanted to account for incremental progress, try to find some early wins, give that feel of momentum. So from a project management perspective, we paid a lot of attention to what we called MVP1, which is pushing 1+ app into a dev or test environment, and then an MVP2, pushing 1+ application into a stage or prod environment. We also have been really focused, and I think smartly so, on teams, the number of teams we talk to, the number of teams we enable by either applying some sort of dojo experience to them or getting pivots to work with them directly, getting our Center of Excellence team to work with them directly. So definitely a lot of team metrics got involved there too. And then the money we spend on our platforms themselves, just our ongoing budget. Other metrics I wish we would have taken a hold of more early on. This gets tricky because this is generally the domain of other teams, but our net impact on the amount of money we spend on licenses for proprietary software. That would be a really good thing to pick off, and that's a good way to get a bunch of people who aren't just your initial constituents, our application development teams, but Pivotal exists to make life easier for developers. It figured out it had to make life easier for operators to be able to do that. This is that same logic, because a lot of those operators and the guys they work for would really love to see that licensing cost come down. So that's another good example of a metric I wish we would have paid more attention to. All right, one final question. I'm sorry, could you speak up?
So were you guys able to realize the return on investment that you had originally forecasted at the beginning of the journey?
So far, so good. We're not done. We are providing the ROI that we had promised to do, and we have the promise of more. So we are on schedule. But I wouldn't say we're done, right? We feel like we are a very resourceful group, and we are very well networked within our own organization too. As a program group, highly underrated and a hard-won victory is just figuring out those internal networks. And again, your vendors will help you do that as much as your own internal teams will. You need those guys to do that with you. But yeah, we have saved the money, and now we can actually start to have real discussions about productivity, which was not an explicit part of the business case, but that's the fun part. All right, guys, thank you all for a very long day, not just on behalf of this session, but for every other one you attended.